He stared at me from the witness stand. A perfect suit, a perfect haircut, the same arrogant glint in his eyes that I hadn't seen since he was a teenager. "I'm sorry, sir, but you don't understand the terms of the agreement," Jackson said, his voice flat and practiced. The judge looked at me, his gaze unreadable, then at the thick stack of papers on his desk. 3 days later, Jackson was at my door, not in a suit, but in a stained sweatshirt, rain slicking his hair to his skull. His face was a mess of tears and snot. "Dad, please," he choked out, his voice hoarse, a plea I hadn't heard since he was a boy. What I did next would change everything. "Before I begin this story, can you tell me where in the world you're listening to from?" It was a cold, hard hope that lived in the fields. The kind of hope that made your back ache and your hands crack. My father had taught me that the land gives nothing you don't earn, and I'd passed that down to my son, Jackson. Or I'd tried. He was a boy built for the city, for glass and steel and screens that glowed at night. He'd come back to our farm in rural Iowa after his mother Kala passed. But he was a ghost, a specter of his former self. He'd walk the fields with his phone to his ear, his voice low and urgent, talking about seed funding and market share. The farm, the home that had held our family for 3 generations, was just a backdrop to his ambition. It was a backdrop for a story I didn't know was already being written. The cracks were there, a silent web of small, forgotten moments. I'd catch him looking at me with a peculiar pity, the kind of look you give a dying thing you can't help. He'd ask about the value of the West 40, the prime piece of land we hadn't tilled in years, the part of the farm Kala had always called her meadow. It was where we'd planted a weeping willow for her after she left us. It was a place for grieving, not for profit. He came to the porch one evening, a slick brochure in his hands, his city shoes caked in the thick Iowa mud. He sat on the Bowden porch swing, which groaned under his weight. My daughter Marigold sat beside me, her hand in mine. She still lived at home, her heart as tethered to the land as mine. Jackson cleared his throat and launched into a presentation about an app he'd designed. An app for farmers, of all things. It promised to revolutionize crop management, and he needed a final round of funding. His investor had pulled out, and he was desperate. "Dad, the West 40 is worth a fortune. We could sell just that piece, and I could get the startup off the ground. Think about it. This is a chance for a new kind of legacy. A legacy that doesn't involve dirt under your fingernails." He spoke with a fervor I hadn't seen in him since his high school football days. I looked at Marigold, whose face had gone pale, her eyes fixed on the distant line of trees where Kala's weeping willow stood. I knew what Jackson was really asking. He wasn't asking for a loan, he was asking for a piece of my soul. His voice went quiet, but the desperation was louder than ever. "Dad, this is my last chance. They're going to pass on me if I don't get the money in 3 days. This is our future. All of our futures. Think about what we could do. We could fix up the old barn. We could finally get new equipment. You wouldn't have to work yourself to death anymore." The words were designed to be soothing, but they felt like a threat. He was holding my hope hostage. I saw the fear in his eyes, the real, raw fear of failure. He wasn't just talking about money, he was talking about his identity. His whole life had been spent trying to escape the shadow of this farm, to prove he was more than a farmer's son. His ambition was a cage, and he was rattling the bars. I had to choose between the promises I'd made to a dying woman and the desperate needs of my living son. I looked out at the fields, the tired, worn-out fields that held a lifetime of memories. I imagined them parceled out, sold off, divided. I knew Kala would have wanted me to help our son, but she would have also wanted me to protect the land. She believed it was the only thing that could truly heal a person. The tension in the air was so thick you could feel it. Marigold squeezed my hand. Her silence was a silent argument, a plea. She knew better than anyone what that land meant. It was her sanctuary, the one place she felt safe. Jackson's partner, a woman named Odessa, called him a few minutes later, her voice a shrill, nervous whisper on the other end. She was talking about a glitch and the whole system failing, and how they were on the brink. I watched Jackson's face fall as he listened, his eyes darting around like a trapped animal. The arrogant facade was gone, replaced by a deep, gut-wrenching dread. He turned his back to me, shoulders slumped. I heard him mumble something about a last resort. He hung up and walked back to his car without a word, the porch swing swaying behind him. He didn't look back. I thought he was defeated. I thought he had given up. I didn't know he had a backup plan. A final, desperate plan. A plan that would change everything. 3 days later, I was on my way to the hardware store when a black SUV with tinted windows pulled up to the front gate. Out stepped Jackson, impeccably dressed, his face hard and unreadable. He walked towards the porch, not with the humility of a son, but with the confidence of a landlord. He held a manila envelope. "We did it, Dad," he said, his voice void of all emotion. A cold, empty vessel. The app launched. We had a soft launch, and it went viral. A tech giant just bought us out for $46 million. My heart leaped into my throat. The elation, the pride, the raw relief washed over me. I wanted to hug him, to cry with him, to tell him how proud I was, but he held up a hand, a gesture of cold finality. He handed me the envelope. Inside was a legal document, a meticulously worded eviction notice. It stated that Jackson was now the sole owner of the entire farm, and I had 30 days to vacate. The world went silent. The sound of the wind, the chirping of the birds, the hum of the engine, all of it faded away into a muffled, distant echo. I read the words, but they didn't make sense. It was a betrayal so profound it felt like a physical blow, a sudden, sharp ache in my chest. He had lied to me, not just about the startup, but about everything. He had used my love and my trust as a weapon. He had come here not to ask for help, but to gather intel. He had planned to take the farm all along, using the fear of his venture failing as a smokescreen. The hope I had felt just moments before was now a shard of ice in my heart. I looked at him, searching for a trace of the boy I had raised. The boy who used to fall asleep on my lap. The boy who used to cling to my hand. But there was nothing there, only a stranger with my son's face. I packed the few things I had left, a worn-out photograph of Kala, a half-empty bottle of whiskey, and a shoebox full of old baseball cards. I left the rest behind. I left the home that held the ghosts of my past and the memories of my future. I drove the old pickup to Marigold's place, a small, 2-bedroom apartment above a dry cleaner in town. She opened the door, her face a mixture of relief and sorrow. I didn't have to say a word. She saw the empty look in my eyes and the dust on my boots. She knew what Jackson had done. She'd known all along. She'd seen the signs I had been too blind to see. She had warned me, but I had refused to listen. I had wanted so badly to believe in my son, to believe in his good heart, but his good heart had been replaced with a calculator. He had weighed the love of his father against the promise of a fortune, and he had made his choice. The following days were a blur. I sat on Marigold's couch, staring at the walls, the television a distant, humming presence in the corner. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. The pain was a living thing, a hungry beast that gnawed at my insides. I thought about the land, the fields, the barn, the house, the weeping willow that Kala had planted. I thought about the promise I had made to her. I had failed her. I had failed the land. I had failed myself. But then Marigold came to me one evening with a cup of coffee and a laptop. "Dad," she said, her voice soft but firm, "you need to see this." She pulled up a news article. A class action lawsuit had been filed against Jackson's company. It was a massive fraud. They had faked user numbers. The company was being sued for every penny it was worth. The lawsuit was so big that they were going to lose everything, including the house he'd just bought in California. But then I saw the line that turned my blood cold. The only asset not tied up in the lawsuit was the farm. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. A cold, hard realization settled in. He hadn't just used me to get the money. He'd used the farm as a shield. He'd planned to throw me out, knowing that if everything went south, he'd still have the farm. He had planned this from the very beginning. His desperation for the West 40 had been a performance. The eviction was a preemptive strike. He had used me, and then he had discarded me. The full weight of his betrayal hit me with a force that knocked the breath from my lungs. The phone began to ring. It was a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring, and then I saw a message. It was from Jackson, and it was a single word: home. He was coming back, but I didn't know why. Not yet. I was sitting on the porch swing, the one Jackson had sat on not a week ago, when the black SUV pulled up again. This time, it didn't look so clean. It was covered in mud, the tires spinning as it got stuck in the soft dirt of the driveway. Jackson stumbled out, his suit rumpled, his face haggard. He didn't look like a millionaire anymore. He looked like a man who had lost everything. He walked with a limp, his posture defeated. He came to the porch, not with the arrogance of a landlord, but with the trembling hope of a boy who had broken a vase he couldn't. He stood before me, silent, his eyes red-rimmed and swollen. He held no manila envelope this time, just a single crumpled piece of paper. He dropped to his knees, not in the way a man kneels to pray, but in the way a man kneels when his legs can no longer hold him. "Dad," he choked, his voice cracking, "I'm sorry. I was so stupid. The lawsuit, they're gonna take everything. The house, the money, everything. The only thing they can't touch is this farm. It's in your name." He looked at me, his eyes pleading, begging. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, naked fear. He was no longer the arrogant son who had thrown me out. He was a beggar, and he was begging for the very thing he had stolen from me. I looked at the crumpled paper in his hand. It was the deed to the farm, signed and sealed, a reminder of the cruel, heartless choice he had made. I felt a surge of cold satisfaction, a bitter, hollow victory. He had come back. He had no one else to turn to. He was alone. I stared at him, my heart aching with a pain so deep it felt like a physical wound. The years of neglect, the phone calls he never answered, the Christmases he missed, the way he had looked at me with pity. It all came rushing back, a flood of grief and betrayal. I wanted to turn away, to tell him to get off my land and never come back. But I saw something else in his eyes. I saw the ghost of Kala. I saw the boy who had lost his mother, a boy who had been adrift in a sea of grief, a boy who had tried to fill the emptiness with ambition and greed. I saw a scared little boy who was running from a pain he couldn't name, a pain that had made him hard and cold. He was still that boy. He was just hiding behind a different face. He was still broken. "Dad, I didn't want to be like you," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I was so angry after Mom died. I felt like she left us. I felt like this farm, this life had just worn her out. I wanted to escape. I wanted to prove I was better than this. I didn't want the same fate for myself. I didn't know how to grieve. I just knew how to run, and I've been running ever since." The confession, so raw and honest, was like a key turning a lock. The truth was finally out. The secrets, the pain, the silent grief that had been festering for years, had finally surfaced. My heart, which had been a stone for days, began to soften. I looked at the boy I had raised, the man who had thrown me out, and the broken man who was now begging for my forgiveness. The choice was mine. I took the deed from his hand, the crumpled paper a testament to his desperation. I looked at the old farmhouse, the porch swing groaning in the wind, the fields stretching out to the horizon. This wasn't just land. It was a legacy. It was the only thing Kala had left me, the only thing that had kept me going. I looked back at Jackson, at his tear-streaked face. He was staring at me, his eyes filled with a desperate, silent plea. I thought about Kala. I thought about the love we had shared, the promise we had made, the life we had built. I thought about the boy we had raised, the one who was now kneeling before me. I looked at him, and I knew what I had to do. I reached out a hand, not to take the deed, but to help my son up. He looked at me, bewildered, and for a moment the world stood still. And then he was in my arms, a broken man begging for forgiveness. And I, the old farmer, knew what I had to do. I let him go. Then I bent down and picked up the crumpled deed to the farm. I opened it and read the names. Mine and his. A tear fell onto the paper, and then another. I looked at him and said, "It's time to come home, son." He looked at me, his eyes wide, and he knew what I meant. He knew,